Muslims of Reddit who have renounced Islam and are now atheists or anything else. What happened and why did you do so? Muslim here. None of it made any sense to me. Even as a young girl, I didn't understand what was the big deal about women showing their hair or their arms and why I wasn't allowed to show mine. I didn't see why dating was so forbidden, and the idea of marrying a total stranger made no sense to me. As an Arab, I didn't get why my Pakistani friend had to pray 5 times a day in Arabic, a language she didn't even understand. I didn't get why my friends, who are perfectly decent people, and their parents, who are honestly nicer than my parents, were going to go to hell just because they weren't raised Muslim. I had so many questions, none of which had reasonable answers. Everything came down to because God said so. The older I got, the more research I did and the more I realized it was all just nonsensical bullshit. My life as a Muslim was honestly hell. I wasn't allowed to do anything that my non-Muslim friends could do. I couldn't talk to boys, I had to cover my entire body from head to toe, couldn't go swimming or wear shorts or anything, I couldn't move out for college, etc. The plan for my life was for me to be raised in my father's house, then move to my husband's house, where I'd have even less rights than I did before. According to Islam, I would have to obey my husband, he would be able to hit me, he could divorce me at any time just by uttering the words divorce, he could marry multiple wives without my permission, he would get custody of the kids if we divorced and I remarried. The list goes on. And when I died, what would my reward be? Oh yes, I'd get to go to heaven and be one of my husband's many wives and sex slaves. There was nothing for me in this religion. Nothing. Now I happily live alone, have a good job, make good money, wear what I want, date whomever I want, eat whatever I want, and feel incredibly happy to have to break ties with your family to live the life you have now. Initially I did, but my parents really do love their children and eventually came around and realized they needed to let me make my own decisions. 6 years ago when I stopped wearing hijab head covering, my mom screamed and yelled at me and told me I was going to hell. A few weeks ago she was brushing my hair and telling me I should get my hair balayaged like an actress she saw on TV. Are they still as religious as then? Yes, but they are more open-minded to other interpretations of the religion than they were before. I had a parallel experience with Christianity. My parents weren't really religious, but my grandmother was. She dragged me to church every Sunday and I remember having a lot of questions that received unsatisfactory answers. One day, when I was 11, one of the boys in our youth group asked the youth pastor about our friends at school that weren't Christian or didn't believe in God. His response was that they'd all go to hell and that's why it was our duty to convert them. I stood it over for the entire session, and when it was over I walked out and walked home without telling anyone I left. My father went to pick me up and no one knew where I was, and apparently he caused a ruckus. Didn't matter though because I never went back. I wouldn't say I'm hardcore atheist and vehemently deny God, but I do believe religion is a man-made construct. Maybe there is a greater force in the universe, but I don't think it would be very particular about what I do on the day-to-day. Throwaway account for personal reason. I grew up Pakistan. Both my parents are good Muslims and people in a sense. My father is less involved in religion and more open-minded person, and I love them both. When I was a teenager I became extremely religious. I prayed 5 times a day. I read the Quran. I shamed my sister for not wearing a hijab and not praying. But still my nature never truly changed. I am a naturally cynical person that finds the worst in human beings. For a time I projected that hatred for people to anyone who wasn't a Muslim. I still always had doubts in my mind about faith that I kept to myself. But what truly took my faith was when my 6-year-old brother was kidnapped. We called the police and we searched for him on your own, and they did find him. Days later he had been raped and killed, his body placed in dustbin with a trash. They never found who did it, but after months of mourning I asked Imam why Allah would allow this. The Imam said that the man who did that will be punished one day and that Allah this to us to test our faith. I screamed at him, how is this a test? What kind of God allow this kind of evil to happen? To put it short, I lost faith in any God or metaphysical being, and I lost faith in the rest of humanity. Born and raised in Saudi Arabia, and lived in California for about 10 years. For most of the years until maybe the last 1 or 2, I had no doubts at all about Islam, and everything was justifiable or had an appropriate interpretation. And then I had friends and co-workers that were very Christian lately, and we engaged in many debates. It was so easy to present them with things that I thought were proofs against their case. But there was always a justifiable reason or an appropriate interpretation. Digging more into the history of Christianity, and early transcripts and all that, I found how heresies form. But after that, I noticed two things. The first was that the formation of Islamic thoughts and concepts was very similar to the formation of Christianity. And the second was that I found a few issues that I could easily prove wrong in Christianity, but found that Muhammad himself believed such problematic mistakes, so there is no way that his source was the ultimate knowing. That's in summary what got me to the conclusion that all religions are man-made. I went back to Saudi for some reasons, and now I live normally here and pretend to be a Muslim. Not to the point of praying all the time and that, but just the usual use of Islamic phrases and reasoning. Someone has a problem, tell them hopefully God has a better plan for them and such, but also, remind them about verses where it says that you should take actions to fix your problems and not just ask God and wait while doing nothing. It's not comfortable, but oh well, there's no way it'll be safe to go public with this. Although Saudi Twitter is filled with atheists, being born in Iran and being forced to have Quran studies once a week was not something I'm particularly fond of to this day. Mind you, this is before I moved to Canada, where I was allowed to have a free life. As I grew up, I saw how my government abused women, children, and even men in the name of Allah and used that to justify any wrong and unethical thing they did. My government is literally using religion to control people, and it opened my eyes, where I decided that religion is just a puppet tool used to attempt to control people by giving them the notion of hell and heaven. In the end, I do believe in God, or a force that exists. However, I no longer believe in any religion purely because if the original religion was real, I don't know how many selfish people may have edited it to their own gain. Sorry if I offended anyone, I'm just stating my personal opinion. This might be a bit stupid, but I started having doubts and getting frustrated when I was around 13-14, beginning of puberty. I guess I was feeling frustrated, uncertain due to how suffocating the religion was. For instance, like any teenager experiencing puberty, I started developing feelings for the opposite sex only to realize that acting on it would result in me being punished for adultery. From what I was taught, the punishment for adultery was being dropped into a metal cone heated via a flame, and every time you reach the top of the cone to escape, you're pushed back in. This is in hell. Lol. Something that bothered me all along even when I was around 10 was that Islam uses fear to control you. I know this is controversial, but this is how it was taught to me, and this is the only Islam I have seen. It hangs the threat of punishment over your head and controls your actions. Something that really pissed me off was that in the Quran it states that parents will be punished for their children's sins. I was a horny 14-year-old who felt bad for watching porn because he was afraid of what would happen to his parents. So all these doubts started culminating, and by the time I was 16 I started partying and drinking like any teenager and distancing myself from Islam. It was around this time that the Arab Spring happened and ISIS started to become prominent. This was the nail in the coffin for me. Even if Allah was real, allowing so many millions of people to suffer just makes him a sadist in my opinion, and I have no intention of worshipping a deity with such little regard for human life. This is a hypothetical BTW. I'm pretty damn sure he does not exist. I should probably add that there were various other doubts with regards to slavery, women's rights, Sharia law. Even 8-year-old me knew it was barbaric. I should also add that most Muslims have a very strong support structure that squash any doubts that they could have over the religion, family, friends, the mosque, etc. Luckily for me, the support structure did not exist because of multiple reasons. I live in a multicultural country and all my friends were of other religions. My family is very introverted, hence we don't interact much with our extended family, and furthermore my parents are very well read and educated. Not trying to be snobbish here, but this affected things and weren't as conservative as many Muslims. Didn't like the hijab, etc. They were still good Muslims though, forced me to pray and stuff. P.S. No offense to any Muslims reading this, it's just my opinion. Feel free to reply. Apologies if the formatting sucks. I'm on mobile and have no idea what it's going to look like. Something that bothered me all along even when I was around 10 was that Islam uses fear to control you. I know this is controversial, but this is how it was taught to me, and this is the only Islam I have seen. This is common among most religions. When I was a kid I had a priest tell me that I was going to hell because I didn't want to be an altar boy. The thing about religion as a whole is that it was originally intended to just be a guideline on how not to be an asshole to other people. Most of our laws, like ones against murder, theft, or indecent exposure, are the result of religion. And that's actually fine. The problem comes when certain people become very powerful and they decide that even small transgressions are punishable. They scour their religious tomes and find small passages that kind of, sort of, maybe if you squint and you are using a pair of cheaters, pertain to the transgression. It's because of this that, according to some people, I'm going to hell because I wear glasses and am slightly overweight, or a friend of mine is going to hell because she has OCD and anxiety disorder, or whatever other problem other people might find. If you think I'm lying about that last bit, check out Leviticus. It should be noted, there was a joke on The Simpsons where Reverend Lovejoy saying something along the lines of, according to the Bible, even pooping is a sin. I always thought it was funny because he said pooping, but the funny though horrifying part is that it's also true. The great irony of it all is that a set of rules intended to stop people from being assholes to each other is just making people more asshole-ish. And that's not just the case for Islam, that's the case for almost every major religion. I grew up in a conservative Muslim household. My father became a huge conspiracy theorist after 9/11, blaming everything and everything on Jews or Zionists. Many of the things other young girls take for granted are things I was forbidden to do, like showing my hair, arms, or knees of course, singing, dancing, having non-Muslim friends. If I made a new friend, my father would always ask me which religion she was from, having male friends, and such. As a girl, it was always installed in me that I was a special jewel or a delicate flower who needs to be protected from the big, bad, evil world at all costs, and that my number one purpose in life was to be a wife and mom who waits on her husband hand and foot and who has lots and lots of good Muslim babies. Modesty is the most important thing for girls, even more important than strength or intellect. And don't even get me started on period shame, sorry guys. Then I went to university and found a means of understanding everything I had gone through. I grew up in a conservative family, raised as a religious person. Well, actually forced to. It all started when I go to college in another city. I've met people from all beliefs and disbeliefs during first 2 years. At first it was hard to accept those ideas because you can't really question things about life in religious mentality. They say it's what it is, it's written in the book and so. But every question brings more with itself. It was hard for me to leave religion like that. But I've read and watched a lot of scientific material and religion became less and less serious. And at the very end, all religions are the same to me. They have gods, prophets, orders about how to live your life, hell and heaven in most cases, and so only names are different. The biggest thing that bugging me is all of those sacred books has very limited information about life. I know it sounds cliche, but it's all about managing purity and how to control masses. And my atheist non-believer friends are much more kind, thoughtful and better persons overall than religious ones. Last but not least, how can you ban pork, man? That's outrageous. It's all about managing people and how to control masses. This is one of, if not the primary function of religion. A set of guiding principles that means everyone in society has the same understanding of how to behave. But now that we have laws distinct from religion, it's less crucial to society.